everybody. Welcome. It is, let me turn myself down here a little bit. Hello, everybody. Jonny Torres with you as always. It's the Yard Sign. Thank you so much for watching as always. Be sure to subscribe to the audio version of our podcast on Apple, Google, and Spotify platforms. Thank you so much. Lots of huge news. And unfortunately, we're not going to be able to cover it all today, but we do have two special guests with us today. One of them a candidate, the other one a good friend of mine who I've been wanting to get on the show for some time. But before we get into that, let's go ahead and talk about today's topics. As you can see over here to my left, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, of course, the headline and has been since Friday. Huge news of her passing. We'll get into not only her legacy, but of course, the opportunity that is now in front of us for those on the right side of the aisle, and certainly with President Trump in office. Then we'll, again, pick up that opportunity apart and talk about whether or not it is the right thing to do to go ahead and find a replacement for Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then announced today. Now, we normally try not to get into breaking news, but the governor, Ron DeSantis, announced today the Law Enforcement Protection Act that also covers protests, rioting, and we're going to kind of pick that apart. Unfortunately, one of our special guests just happens to be very qualified to discuss this issue, and that guest happens to be Mike Perotti, who's a candidate for state attorney. Incredibly talented guy. I've already had the chance to meet him once, and right away was just incredibly excited to invite him on the show. And so he's going to be joining us any minute now. But for now, let's go ahead and turn it over to today's cast. We've got, again, some new faces for today. To my left, from left to right, there on your screen, we've got Christian Leon, and Christian, again, friend of mine for a long time. We actually used to do political commentary on what was formerly known as Infomas, no longer a channel here in the Tampa Bay area, but it was a 24-hour news network in Spanish for the Tampa Bay area, and unfortunately no longer in existence. But it was a lot of fun always to kind of have political banter, and so I thought this would be a great opportunity to bring him on, and hopefully he'll be back. How you doing, Christian? Oh, sorry, hold on. Still had you on mute there. Go ahead.
Strategically,
still getting. I know, right?
How convenient
that I have a mute button.
It's nice because I can say anything and just leave it to the lip readers out there.
It is incredibly convenient that I have a mute button over here. But man, thank you so much for coming on the show. Like I said, I have wanted to get you on here for some time. I'm glad we finally made it happen. Really quickly, just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Just narrow it
that
down
too much to ask?
Just me.
Yeah.
What will I say? Born and raised in Tampa. Jesuit grad for the Tampa people out there. Went up to Boston for school. Got a law degree. Came back. Broke my parents' heart, telling them I did not want to practice law. Jesuit grad for the Tampa went into communications for a while. And done a lot of PR marketing and been involved in different community-oriented things for a while, and I feel like it's hard to be engaged in the community and not engaged in politics in some fashion.
Right.
And recently, as of last year, I became the executive director of a nonprofit called the Community Enrichment Lab. And for those familiar with Tampa, the area around the university has evolved into an innovation district through a lot of work by a lot of the powers that be, a lot of people that are really trying very hard to envision the fruition of a research park, building on, the incredible strides that USF has made as a research institution, and building on the incredible work at Moffitt, and a lot of research is being done at the VA. And there's a lot of large players in the area that really kind of understand the gravitas of those institutions and everything they have to offer on a national, and I think we can argue a global scale at this point.
Sure.
And so since that area is kind of earmarked for a lot of capital investments and a lot of positive kind of evolution and development, my organization was created to make sure that as that evolves, the community is always kept in mind, and that we find ways that we can, capitalize on the resources that are available in the area, whether they're, financial or academic expertise and knowledge, and we can apply all that to the community. And then we also find a lot of opportunities for the community to benefit the development. And I think, it meant a lot to me personally to get invited to participate and to engage professionally in this, because a lot of the times it seems like the community is an afterthought with a lot of major projects. And I think that a lot of times there's a lot of consequences that we have to deal with afterwards. And it's very nice to kind of get going from before anything major happens. So I'm excited, and hopefully you can get some good work done.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for, again, being on the show with us today. There's obviously some pretty heavy topics about. Can't wait to hear your insight on that. And to his left is, as always, Mr. Anibal, David Cabrera. How are you, sir?
Hey, guys. Doing good.
So
glad to be here.
I know you're particularly excited about this
I am.
Ruth Bader Ginsburg news.
Well, okay, that sounds horrible. I'm not.
Well, no, I know. I'm not. Yes, that was a terrible way for me to put it. Sorry.
Good job, Jonny.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's jump into. Why is this not cooperating here? Sorry. Hang on, guys. There we go. Let's go ahead and jump into today's first topic, which again, it is the unfortunate news of the passing of Supreme Court Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. It's something that, we'd kind of known for some time, was kind of touch and go. Everyone certainly was just kind of on edge anytime that she would go into the hospital. We heard reports of her health. Of course, typically when she would be released from the hospital, they were all positive in nature. But again, she was a cancer survivor many times. And it's one of those things that she certainly lived an amazing life that I'm sure will be talked about for generations. And so for us to have this conversation again, it's one of those opportunities where you want to just put the politics aside and truly just recognize the symbol, the icon that she was, following Sandra Day O'Connor in terms of being the second woman on the Supreme Court. And you can come in, buddy, and grab that seat right there. But it's one of these things that you can't really, even in 1 hour, I would say, get across the impact that she had on this nation's kind of legal community and certainly the laws of our country. Again, now joining us, and you're going to have to scoot in real tight over to Christian there, and then grab that mic there, is Mike Perotti.
Get up close to Christian?
Yeah.
Get closer.
You want to make sure you're in that shot right there. And so, whoop. And so let's go ahead and talk about real quick. She, of course, was someone who, out of all the judges, she was someone that certainly everyone seemed to want to know what she had to say. What was she thinking whenever the ruling came out? They wanted to hear her opinion on the different decisions that were made by the Supreme Court. Do you think is she kind of monolithic in that sense, unique in that sense, or it kind of is one of those people that comes across once in a lifetime, or is this something that because she was, of course, the longstanding female in this court, that she certainly had just more attention given to her? Again, Mike Perotti joining us over at the big table. Hello, sir.
How are you all doing?
Good. I'll come over there and adjust that mic here in a second. So, Anibal, what are you thinking first of all on RBG's passing?
So it was looking at her history and realizing what kind of person she was and how she had become, and just a cultural phenomenon that she had turned into with her letters being used in songs and her workout videos. My wife had seen that. She loved it. It became almost like a cultural icon for a lot of people. I think what she became, what she's done in her life was phenomenal. Just looking at a few points of it, talking about wanting to make sure that police forces were more multiracial. She had a huge issue with Colin Kaepernick and calling him dumb and disrespectful about what his protesting. I thought that was hilarious with her. She was a great supporter of Israel and by donating to schools, accepting awards from the government of Israel. So I think she did a lot of things that a lot of people could be proud of. Now, did I agree with every single decision she made? Of course not. I wouldn't say that of anyone besides maybe Anthony Scalia would probably be the only one that I might take that back for. But I think she was a great individual, and I think her presence will be missed on the court. She worked hand in hand on both sides, and she was a good justice. So it'll be interesting to see who fills her seat, who fills her shoes, and hopefully it'll be someone that can live up to that kind of caliber.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and throw you on the spot here, Mr. Perotti, since to kind of penalize you for being late. RBG, you, my friend, are an attorney. We'll get into your race later on in the show. But tell us from the legal community, what's kind of been the outcry? What's been the response to her passing?
Well, I think that I echo the sentiments that she was a very special person. She, agree or disagree, whether you have the same political leanings that she may have had, she was bold. She was willing to tell you exactly how she felt about an issue. And quite frankly, I find that refreshing. I think I'd rather have somebody that is going to be a bit of a lion, as she's also referred to, in really being strong and passionate in the things that they believe in. And when you're talking about somebody sitting on the Supreme Court, don't you want somebody with a strong internal moral compass and sense of right and wrong and sense of obligation to this experiment called the United States of America and democracy, right? You don't want them rolling over and folding, wilting like a flower every time something gets difficult. So, right now, certainly you're going to see all of the contentiousness that goes with what to do next. I don't think you'll fill those shoes at all. I think that there will be somebody else that comes along and have to blaze their own trail. And whether or not that happens under this administration or gets held over into the next administration remains to be seen. There'll be ample articles written about that in the coming days and weeks, and I'm sure we'll have a nice show to watch about all the efforts to, on one side, get it done, and on the other, to stop it from happening. And it is our process, and we've got to sit back and see what happens, and hopefully everyone, regardless of which side of the aisle you're on, will not behave in ways to reduce the respect or the character of our process.
Thank you so much. I mean, it's beautifully said. It was interesting because, of course, we're so quick nowadays. Everybody wants to put out their opinion about, every political bit of news that comes out, and I'm certainly guilty of it most of the time. But this was one where, because of her grandeur, because of her stature, because of the impact that she had on our country, and me not being well-versed in exactly the decisions, that she's going to be remembered for, and for a lot of her history, I said, I'm going to sit this one out, because I didn't feel it would be right for me to just put out some sort of to try to feign some sort of political statement or some sort of adulation or even criticism, if that had been the case. And so it's interesting again, to see those who are involved in the process, those who understand what goes into, especially at the local level, all the way on up, into making the decisions that she has throughout her career. That to me has been far more interesting to watch. And in many ways, I hope, that all of our judges are kind of revered this way. But, one of the things that we've seen, obviously, with Brett Kavanaugh's confirmation is that, much like our politics, the nominations of these judges becoming more and more polarized. And so hopefully, we'll kind of step away from that, again, in these kind of instances. But it was one of those things where I just wanted to let everybody else kind of tell the story, right? And let them kind of dictate how she's going to be remembered. And of course, there's movies, documentaries, books, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot more coming now with her passing. Christian, before we go to you, I just really quick want to read here. Thank you so much for everybody commenting on our Facebook broadcast here. Devin saying, love the relationship she had with Scalia. They traveled the world and mixed among their families for years. Hector, what created the size of her presence on the court wasn't just being the senior female on the court, but her thinly disguised liberalism. She might have supported Israel, but she was also unabashedly pro-choice. And that's the thing. A lot of people are right now, because of the nature of our politics, are painting her, as maybe a more of a liberal judge than she maybe really was. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, I mean, I'll jump off first again. I believe that it's pretty clear that when you look at many of those split decisions, she came down on the liberal side of things, but I do not believe that it was ever without merit. It's not like she couldn't back up the basis for her position, and it wasn't well articulated. And so we go back to that. You can agree or disagree with an individual, but so long as they're coming at you from a position of well thought out, well analyzed perspective, sometimes you just walk away and go, oh, okay, I get it. I'm going to go the other direction, but I hear where you're coming from. I'm going to echo what you said, John. I mean, the partisan pull that's coming in right now across this country, both at the federal level and the local levels, for me is something that at some point in time, the citizens, the voters need to step up and say, knock it off, and let's start trying to ensure that we are making decisions and putting people in office based on their principles, based on what we know about them and the research we've done to try to get to the truth of things, and not just fall into this pigeonhole thing. And so I'm glad you and many others aren't trying to come back and label Ginsburg as something so unfair as one particular thing or another. Too complicated, too much of an impact on the system. Let's just let it go, and let's appreciate the service that was provided by her for so many years.
Yeah, Christian, sorry to kind of skip on you there, buddy. But my little dirty secret in kind of selfishly inviting you to the show here is, again, to provide the center-left point of view. I mean, again, we kind of had our political banter many times on television, on Infomas here locally in Tampa Bay. Give us a little bit of your perspective. What do you see as the impact, not only on her career and and how that's affected the country from your perspective, but also how do you feel this is going to affect the elections, and we'll kind of start transitioning into the effect that's going to have on November altogether.
Well, first, I think I want to echo everyone's sentiment so far. I mean, she was a person who made herself respected and made her views respected through her eloquence and through her reason. I don't think that anyone questions her desire to be faithful to the Constitution, to the spirit of the Constitution, to the spirit of, as you said, the American experiment. And I think that if we can engage in that type of elevated discussion, and we can all agree that we're searching for the good for the country and the good for the citizens of the country, and that's really the ultimate endeavor of what we're trying to accomplish, then I think that we can actually possibly have some positive, real, tangible things that we can all be proud of as a country. So I think that, I am always optimistic, and I know that, my optimism will be dashed at some point soon. But I do hope that this is at least a moment of civility in the political discourse, and it's again a reminder for us that if we do approach these things this way, that we could really have some great dialogue and conversations and find ways to all move forward without the divisions that have been there in the past. So, how this will affect the campaign, I think that unfortunately our political discourse has devolved to the point where I don't have a lot of hopes that this is going to be something very positive. I think that this will instantly be seen as an opportunity to appoint someone to the Supreme Court that's going to champion certain issues that are important to, the voters that are faithful to a side or the other. I do think that it's important to note for everyone in general. I think that, for me, studying law and having that education really made me understand the importance of the Supreme Court. And I think it's very important. I mean, I think it's very... the common American who tries to understand what's happening in this country is bombarded with political messaging from campaigns, from party politics, from local politics, for whatever. And I think that we always kind of tend to focus on what's going on in the political sphere, and we tend to forget about what's happening in the courts. And I think that, if you look back at American history, it's the Supreme Court that has had to really, really think very, very hard about some critical issues and come to some type of some ultimate type of decision that's going to move this country forward. So I think that, to me, it's always better to have a balanced court. It would make more sense to have a group of individuals on the court that are going to be discussing things and trying to reach that common ground, instead of having, divisions between ideologues that are, far away from the center.
But do you think, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but do you think that the system that we have right now, which has been we can definitely say that there's been a change in the system from 1970s and going forward to where we expected the House and the Senate to make some pretty big decisions and then let the courts make that final yay or nay, to where now everything just gets kicked up to the courts. Nothing is really debated on the Senate floor. Nothing's really debated in chambers. And this is what my real crux of the story is, that we allow politicians to almost gerrymander us or rig us into having to get into our camps. Now that we're in this position, now that everyone's going to have this conversation, now it goes down to 3 topics: abortion, maybe immigration, and maybe 1 or 2 other topics. Like, that's not what we should be voting. I want to know the larger conversations of their monopoly theories of how companies should be working, and should we be breaking up monopolies? Like, I want to know other topics from these judicial candidates than just abortion. Like, I want to know more things. And I think it's really a negative of where we are right now politically, of that's the only topic we're going to talk about. Whereas, again, I agree completely with RBG's position when it came to her position on abortion. I don't think the government should have any position whatsoever. The same way I don't believe that the government should have any position on what happens in someone's bedroom or what happens with someone's conversation with a doctor. Like, these are kind of fundamental conversations we can all agree on, but we allow politicians to push us one side or the other. Like, I loved her position on, what was the other one? Gender discrimination. I completely agree with her position on that, or her position on search and seizures. These were fascinating conversations. And because she was the elder on the court, she got to write a lot of the opposing positions because she was the head of, I don't want to use the word head, but she was like the oldest member of the left wing of the Supreme Court. And so I love reading her opinions and her dissension, because I might not have agreed, but I could understand. And I think she did that so eloquently in her position pieces.
Well, again, thank you, everybody, for joining us. This is The Yard Sign, coming to you from our new podcast studio at Bake More Pies. Thank you to Cords and the team, Bake More Pies, for allowing us to do this show here every week. And that's why you'll see a little bumps along the way, just as I continue to get familiar with all the equipment and everything. But again, we're talking about not only the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, but we're also going to go ahead and get into the replacement aspect of it, which, again, given that, they always say you want to dump bad news on a Friday. Well, there you have it. We got our bad news on a Friday, but that certainly didn't stop anybody from not only commenting on it, but certainly starting to strategize. Guys, we of course heard pretty much right away that of course if you've watched even The West Wing, I mean they've had a waiting list, for this sort of thing for quite some time, and so as you guys have already mentioned, there's some names that have been thrown out there. It's now comes the debate where Republicans are being called out for, of course, not bringing to the floor the vote for Merrick Garland in 2016. But again, those of us who are more constitutionalists than I would say maybe Republicans in that sense, and willing to kind of separate those two. Do you guys again, we're already hearing that maybe by the end of this week that we'll have a name from the president as to who he might want to put up for the first vote. Lagoa, who I think they've been talking about, who's on the Supreme Court here in Florida, from Miami, apparently, according to Newsmax, and I saw this just before we got started on the show, she is already out of contention. Even though she had been in meetings in D.C. last week. And, again, interesting how she was in D.C. just last week, going around having meetings, makes you wonder how much internally they kind of maybe knew that this was coming. But I know a lot of Floridians were excited about Judge Lagoa, or is it justice or judge? How do you kind of, Mike?
It's both.
It's both? Okay, all right. I just want to make sure I was giving her proper title. But Justice Lagoa, apparently no longer in contention, even though she was one of the top names being put up for consideration. So let's first tackle the issue of just replacement in general. Again, constitutionally, the Senate, the president are obligated to nominate and fill that replacement, regardless of it being an election year. But a lot of people are calling out Republicans for what they did in 2016. So who do you think has the upper hand on this agreement? Who wants to go first here? Don't all jump at once.
I'll go.
Mike, go ahead. I'll throw it over to you again.
I think that the irony is not lost on me that in 2016, when this very issue was being discussed with the Garland nomination, it was Ginsburg herself in an interview with the New York Times that specifically said, there's nothing that says the president isn't still the president in the last year of office. And it's his job to do it, and the Senate should do their job and not obstruct things. So what you first got to decide is whether or not you believe that in 2016 the Republican Party played fair or played dirty poker. And depending on how you, in your own mind, reach that decision, you've then got to decide, okay, we'll do two wrongs make a right. So if I believe internally that what they did wasn't the right thing to do in 2016, does it make it okay for me to now make the same argument because it suits my purposes this time? Or do we stay inconsistent with the law, but consistent with our actions and say, no, we're going to delay this one too? Because the law does not say anything about this, you can't do it. It's just not there. I'm sorry, the Constitution says nothing about there's a timeout for some imaginary hypothetical time for the remainder of a presidential term.
Right.
Does it create a significant issue, particularly now where we have such partisan pulls and pushes going on? Yeah, it really puts the high stakes poker game is up right now. And
yeah, but it's also not impossible.
it can be done.
We've
40
seen,
some days.
I don't even think but that's not the conversation that's being had right now. The conversation that's being had is, are we taking this as what we thought and what we said in 2016?
Right. Should it be done? It's not can it be done?
Yeah,
should it be
that's
done?
the
Or should we
conversation.
stop it from happening?
We've had justices confirmed in less than 15, 16 days.
Right.
So it's not like it's an impossible feat to occur. It just depends on what party is in power as president, what party is in power of the Senate, and what party is in power of the House. Well, the House doesn't even matter. It's really the Senate.
It's the Senate.
So to be completely honest, in 2016, the Republicans had the Senate. We had a Democrat president, and again, back then we could make the decision if it was going to happen or not, because and I say this, I am more upset with Senator Harry Reid from his decision in 2013, we kind of talked about this earlier, when he made the decision to lower the threshold for judicial nominations from 60 to 51. And the moment he did that, and again, you're going to start seeing those tweets come back again. He did the tweet November 21st, 2013, that he said, "Thanks to all of you who encouraged me to consider the filibuster reform. It has been done," which was considered the nuclear option back then, and he allowed that to occur. So before, it was you had to get 60 votes, and that was a great number, because that means if you weren't getting to that number, and again, I don't know the numbers on the top of my head, but like Scalia was like affirmed with 98 votes.
Right. If
and
you
like,
picked correctly,
then it
you
would be
should
a
get
high.
60 votes.
Exactly. And so the judges that they were pushing, the Obama administration was pushing, were never going to get anywhere near the Republicans whatsoever. So it was never going to happen. And again, the Republicans were like, no, we shouldn't do it because it's an election year. It's all politics.
Yeah, but this is the difference that, of course, now Mitch McConnell is out there making. This is, again, where Republicans are pushing back on this, which is that you had a Republican Senate and a Democrat president, and even if they had gone and tried for a vote of Merrick Garland, he wasn't going to get confirmed. And so Obama, trying to make it a play for Hillary, didn't really push that hard, and certainly didn't nominate anybody else, for fear of it affecting her campaign. And so what they're saying is that the reason why the circumstances are different is because you have a Republican president and a Republican Senate, and so that is the difference between 2016 and now, and why they should go ahead and fill that slot. And I think he's right, although they should have filled the slot anyways. I mean, they're again constitutionally obligated to have at least had the vote.
Go through the motions.
Yeah.
If you're a constitutionalist,
yes, go through
even
the
if
motions.
you know that there's a slim to none chance of the person actually passing muster, do your job. And that's where we find ourselves now. You had folks that in one moment arguably either engage, as you said with Reed, in what seemed like a really good idea at the time, and now when the shoe's on the other foot isn't necessarily something that anybody's excited about. And those are the perils of decisions that are driven by something other than what the Constitution expected you to do and representing the best interest of your
correct
of your nation.
And that's where this all falls at the end of the day. Again, if it was a Democrat president with a Democrat Senate, they would be doing the same thing. I mean, these are not difficult conversations to have. This is the political reality that we're living in right now. Even Ruth Bader Ginsburg felt that it should be fulfilled even within the term. So if the woman that we're replacing, that person who believed in us replacing her when the time happened, then let it happen. Again, this is basically where the chips fall. No one was expecting this to happen. This isn't a Pelican Brief situation. If people can understand that reference, then so
that's an 80s kid reference.
Yeah, and I love that movie. But again, if that's where the chips are falling and that's where it's going to happen. Now, it's going to look horrible for Democrats to vote no on a female judicial nominee, especially if she gets put in, because they're been playing the woke politics for this in the last 4 years. So if she passes the mustard and everything else, whatever that term is, then it would be very difficult to say that you're not voting for her over political reasons. I mean, that's the conversation. Now, does that help Trump? Does that harm Trump? I have no idea. I don't think this was on anyone's radar 5 days ago.
Well, Christian, I can see you over there just wringing your hands underneath that desk. By all means, this is a safe space. Feel free to unleash. Because again, I know that liberals are very angry about this. They're very angry that it's even talked about. They're very angry that it's even being considered. And again, they're all trying to pull this 2016 but, and not that they're incorrect. They're absolutely right calling out the hypocrisy, but it is constitutionally required for them to do it. And so how do you see this kind of continuing to play out? Do they just continue to push back, or do they just hope and cross their fingers that they have the votes to turn down the confirmation?
I think that it's just going to add fuel to the fire for the campaign, for the elections.
On both sides?
Right, on both sides, or one or the other?
I mean, I think so. I think that anytime you start talking about, potential Supreme Court decisions that are going to change the course of the country in some significant way, then it becomes something that people really are going to fight for this over. It becomes a fight about principles and a fight about beliefs and what people want to see the court doing. So I think that... unfortunately, this is just going to be more political mechanics than anything else. But I think that one of the points that was made earlier that, I think all of us kind of agree is that something can be of benefit, like a procedural, a decision on how to proceed and procedure could benefit either party at a certain time with certain circumstances. So I think that, unfortunately, that type of mentality only leads to future complications. And I think that,
live by the sword, die by the sword.
Exactly.
Well, because I'll throw this
So-
out there. I mean, let's say Trump goes ahead and puts somebody up. Female, male, doesn't matter, whatever. Let's say that person, because as of right now, Democrats have the advantage. They've got enough Republicans saying that they're not going to vote or would vote against a nominee.
No, they don't.
I thought there was
There's
two
only
with a
two.
third on the fence.
Oh, I thought there were 5.
No, there's 2, a possible third, and we were able to lose.
Romney's
3.
the one that's kind of like hiding his
That's
cards, right?
That's Romney's the number 3.
Oh, he is the number 3.
He is number 3. Allegedly that he might.
All right, but let's say
he's on the side.
Let's say they don't have the votes. Let's say the confirmation, and we can swing this either way. If if let's play both ways. If the nominee is confirmed, what effect does that have on November? If the confirmation does not go through, what effect does that have on November? And I'll throw it back to you, Christian.
If someone does get confirmed, I think it'll just be interesting who that person is and what they stand for and what issue they're seen as championing, because whatever issue that is, that's going to become front and center for a while, and we're all going to be talking and debating about it. And if it's something that is it's going to hit that, it's going to be a very sensitive topic for people in the country, then I think it's unfortunately, it seems like the way that the campaign strategies are is simply to pit one side against another and to see who gets more riled up and to try to get out the vote. And I think that unfortunately, both sides of the aisle are going to think that during campaigns. So the more, extreme or the more volatile this issue is, the more they think that they're going to get the base out to come vote. So,
Well, I don't think any Republican is not going to vote for Trump for not moving forward with the Supreme Court nomination. I don't think that's going to happen. I also have a lot more confidence in Cocaine Mitch doing what needs to get done. Doing what needs to get done. It's all me. That's
You just wanted to throw that out there.
hashtag. I don't think he would have. He is such a tacticianer when it comes to the Senate that he would not have said anything if he didn't have the votes already. This has been I don't think anything about the Pelican Brief. However, I do think a lot of conversations have been had over the months and maybe even years. I mean, she was born in 1933. Come on, there's a folder or it's a folder in someone's drive that has this conversation already laid out. And if he didn't have the votes, he wouldn't have done it. I think it gives him enough leeway that some people can get out of it. I think the senator from Alaska, the senator from Maine, they're in very difficult races. They can do that vote and say no, and they'll be fine in their districts. And so I think I wouldn't be surprised if there is a nomination at the end of the week, someone to be put up, and I wouldn't be surprised if they pass. And I think that will benefit the base of the Republican Party, honestly.
Yeah, I think they could lose up to 4 and still have Pence as the swing vote to get over the hill, I believe.
There's
I'm
35.
pretty sure that's what that is.
There's 53 senators, so they can lose 3 and still have Pence. So they can only lose 3 votes. Because then it would be, if they lose 4, they're at 49. And
I'll
then
take your word for it.
Well, and so to Mike, I mean, what do you think is the kind of legal, I mean, not the legal, but we'll get to that in a little bit, but what do you think is the political fallout from this?
I don't see how you spin up this election any more than it already is. I mean, literally, Hillsborough County is a pretty laid back, easygoing, diverse population. And even here, we don't go more than a couple days without there being a little bit of an issue or some sort of a dust up somewhere in this county over these perceived polar opposites of philosophy and idea. And that's just in our community. So you already have folks that are absolutely entrenched in this belief that this is the end all make or break defining election for the fate of America, right? This is it. Mm-hmm. All the chips are on the table. And I certainly stipulate that there are some important issues at stake. Mm-hmm. But boy, I sure hope that America is bigger than one election. I hope that whatever is the outcome of November 3rd, that we are more resilient and wiser and more capable as a democratic nation than being brought to our knees or choosing to cripple each other by virtue of our acrimony over not winning. whatever side that might be.
You know, because the big kind of scare tactic that liberals are already employing is that they would put forth a very pro-life judge and then go after Roe versus Wade, which I don't see that happening.
I don't see that happening.
I think that's incredibly to the right. That's incredibly far right to go after Roe versus Wade. And I don't see it happening. I'm not saying that many conservatives wouldn't want that to happen. I just don't think that's realistic. Now, I think if you put up a nominee and it gets passed, I don't think it really does anything for the Trump campaign other than, just another notch on the belt. But where I think it does affect Trump politically and down ballot, goes for them as well, is if he puts up a nominee, doesn't get it confirmed, and now you've got a strike on the board against you, and it's seen as a failure. And I think that gives momentum, energy to the Biden campaign, which right now is, running on fumes anyways. There's virtually no excitement, and feel free to tell me otherwise, Christian, for the Biden campaign. And this could be something to kind of jumpstart it, and get people fired up about maybe Biden winning in November.
Yeah, I will say this. I know a lot more Democrats that vote pro-life than I do Republicans that vote pro-choice. And I'll say this, that if it becomes an issue of the abortion conversation, you see a lot more Democrat that lean Republican that probably will either choose to not vote at all or just will vote because of it. It was such a big deal in the 2018 midterms with Kavanaugh that it swung the vote for a lot of people. And that still sticks to a lot of individuals of how destructive. So again, if it's a female that is a family woman and you start reading those, if they do the same thing they did with Kavanaugh, it's going to be a nightmare for the Democratic Party, because how are you now attacking a family woman? I don't even know where the attacks would go to. So that's the thing. What ammo are the Democrats going to use to try to take out this person? The best thing for them to do is try to get it out before it even happens, which is just making sure he doesn't have the votes. But if they can confirm the votes, it's going to be interesting. And I think it pulls more Republicans to ensure they vote, and probably MPAs, honestly. That's the biggest driver for this election, because the camps have already solidified. We're 40-something days away? They've already solidified. It's the MPAs that we have to start working for, especially down ballot.
Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up on this. Again, thank you so much for watching The Yard Sign. Be sure to subscribe to the audio version of our podcast on Google, Spotify, and Apple platforms. And again, down here on the news crawl, you can certainly see all of our social media platforms. Mike Perotti, Christian Leon, and Anibal David Cabrera joining us today. Before we turn over to the next topic, Mike, I do want to ask you, again, being an attorney, being someone who has a much better understanding of the impact that appointing judges, certainly at the Supreme Court, obviously, but we've heard time and time again, one of the biggest successes, what may be Trump's lasting legacy, is the impact that he's having on the courts across the country. Give us a little bit of better insight on exactly what that means.
Well, because, and again, I've already told you, I'm a constitutionalist, so I believe that whether I like the law or not, we are obliged to follow it up until the time where the legislators elected by the people decide to rewrite the law and do something different with it. That's how you're supposed to fix it. So I come to this conversation with a natural hesitation from what's generally referred to as judicial activism. That's something that always, I get uncomfortable with it, because I feel like we are not staying true to what was meant by the separation of powers at that point in time. It allows for absentee legislators. It allows for them to abdicate that very difficult job of stepping in and defining the law as the will of the people. But what you've seen with some of the appointments that are constitutionalists, that are textualists, is the other word that gets thrown around a lot in this day and age, are individuals who, at least in theory, on that bench, wearing that robe, will understand that no matter how much they may dislike a law, no matter how much they might dislike the outcome of the application of law, it is their obligation to follow it. And if the consensus following that judicial determination is that we don't like this outcome, directly applying this law, go back and fix it, legislators. That's what you're supposed to do. So when you look at the appointments that have been made across the federal circuits, here in Florida especially, some of the 11th Circuit appointments and so on and so forth, I can tell you from personal experience in practicing in federal court that it does make a difference in the discussions, the dialogue, and in some cases the rulings that you can expect out of circuits. And we're talking important issues. There's been a lot of debate over the qualified immunity issue, and certainly different circuits around this country interpret and apply the qualified immunity principles very differently, almost in a way that makes you think, how could that be the same country ruling two different ways? So the role those judges plays is critical. It is something that has a lasting impact on the shape of the nation as attorneys doing what they do, explore the edges, push the boundaries of things, try to find a new avenue to protect a right and interest, whatever the case may be. So you cannot understate the significance of a large number of judicial appointments that in theory came from a certain ideological slant, I guess is the fairest way to say it. And we don't know what. I want them to do what's right. I don't care what their politics are. Do the right thing. Protect the people. Apply the law.
Well, thanks again for joining us, Mike. We're going to talk about your campaign in just a bit, but I do want to get to one more huge bit of news that came out earlier today, and I want to thank. There was a couple of people who actually sent it over to me and asked that we discuss it today. Huge announcement by the governor, actually right over next door in Polk County with Sheriff Grady Judd, no less, about this new, what I'm calling the Law Enforcement Protection Act. That's only part of the title. Let me go ahead and pull it up here while I kind of start this topic. It's the Combating Violence, Disorder, and Looting and Law Enforcement Protection Act. They certainly couldn't find a cool acronym for it either.
So it's Republican, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Had it been a Democrat governor, they would have found like some cool name for it. So let me throw it back over to you guys, and we'll start with Mike, if that's okay, because this is right up your alley. I mean, we're talking what some Democrats are already saying is possibly an infringement on our First Amendment rights, but prohibition on violent or disorderly assemblies, prohibition on obstructing roadways, which that one I like, prohibition on destroying or toppling monuments. I mean, this is right out of everything we've seen over the past 5-6 months. Prohibition on harassment in public accommodations, RICO liability, mandatory minimum jail sentences for everything I just mentioned, offense enhancements, and then also some citizen and taxpayer protection measures, which include no defunding of the police permitted, victim compensation, government employee / benefits, and bail. So, I mean, it looks like the governor was just sitting at home watching what was happening in Portland and being like, okay, that, and just, threw it into a beautiful little PDF right here. Nice job on that, at least on the formatting, because it certainly was easy to read. Mike, this is going to be put up to the legislature. I know I kind of sprung it on you here a couple hours ago, and I hope you got a few minutes to give it a look. What do you think?
Oh, no, you weren't the only one that sent me a copy of it. And I guess my first response is, everybody, please let's not lose our mind just yet. Okay, this is a stage one. Here's an idea for some legislation I'd like to get passed as the governor of things that are important to me. And there's a lot that's going to go into that sausage before anything actually comes out the other side, because there are things that sound good. There are things with good intentions in theory, or that you're trying to curb certain behaviors that probably we can all agree, we don't want to see that anymore. But exactly how you curb that without inappropriately overstepping some other things that we also want to protect is where the magic's going to happen on that, right? So,
yep.
I don't have it in front of me, but I can go off the top of my mind that there were some pretty strong things in there about bail. And, again, I'm a constitutionalist, so bail's in the Constitution. That's one of those things that you're supposed to get for the most part, unless there's some specific reason why you represent an imminent threat to the public or flight risk and so on and so forth. So I think we've got to be careful about how this stuff ultimately comes out, so that it's not overreaching, so that it's not starting to squash equally significant rights like First Amendment rights, like making sure that individuals who are aggrieved or have a frustration that needs to be aired don't feel like there's a chilling effect on that. Now, when you get right to it, some of the things that are in there, with those, the blocking the roads aspect. Okay, you already can't block the roads.
Correct.
We just haven't really necessarily been enforcing that so well and consistently all the time. But it's already there. Without a permit, you're not supposed to be protesting and obstructing traffic.
Well, we saw Tampa PD
It's
do
becoming a thing now in Tampa.
Yeah, but we also saw Tampa PD do a really good job of shutting that down really quick. Of course, your activists are all up in arms about them being arrested for protesting. But again, they're endangering it's public safety.
They're endangering themselves and others.
Correct.
I don't want anybody getting hurt, and that's why in a park, on a sidewalk, wherever you want to be, don't harass people, don't block business, don't obstruct traffic, but get your message out to your heart's content. I mean, I believe that to my core. The thing about deputies being injured, you all know I love law enforcement. I respect what they do. There's laws in the books about battering law enforcement already. That's there. We know you're not supposed to throw things at law enforcement. We know that you're not supposed to spit on them, to throw dangerous objects at them and whatnot. I appreciate the sentiment. I like the notion of let's stand up and make sure that we are practicing First Amendment rights in an intelligent, reasonable way where we're not endangering ourselves and law enforcement and everybody else and not having all these distractions from the meaningful message that should be there. And I think that legislators are going to have to work very hard to clean up these intentions and try and get to where they want to get to it in a way that will be capable of being upheld in court, because all this is going to get challenged. I mean, you try and do some of these things, expect some very quick, fast and furious challenges by the attorneys out there on constitutional grounds, on as applied grounds, and that's just more stuff slugging through the court hallways, by the way, which are already going to be really in over their head with COVID and what it's done to backing up our system. So you think about what 2021 is going to be like in the hallways of the courthouse, and then you add stuff like this where we're going to be trying to get to that. Yeah, it's going to be a busy year.
Well, we already know every single county now has lawsuits in their hands when it comes to the mask requirements and all the kind of again, I don't have an issue with wearing a mask, not wearing a mask. I think it's a fundamental problem having an attached fine and jail time for someone wearing a piece of clothing or not wearing a piece of clothing. That's where I have a bigger problem with. And I think when you look at this, you read through it, I don't disagree with any of it. I see problems that can occur. I definitely see issues that are going to be tested in the courts. I don't disagree, but it's almost carved out. It's like the governor was literally watching CNN. Watching CNN for 2 minutes and seeing what's happening when restaurants are being harassed in New York City, when highways are being stopped in Portland. I think that's exactly what he saw, and it looks like it's been done like that. I wouldn't be surprised if this has been, again, this probably pages and pages of additional workup. So we're just hitting the bullets.
That's right.
That we're watching. So I agree with you. I don't think people should panic when they read this, because I think there's a lot more verbiage that's going to come out. I think these were just the highlighted points. I agree with some of it. I kind of feel that it's going to be encroaching on people's fundamental civil rights, and I wouldn't be surprised if it's corrected or changed as it goes through the course that it needs to go through to get out of committee.
And the one you just said, and I didn't mention it in mine, so that image we've all seen now on social media of a couple trying to have dinner at a restaurant somewhere and literally getting verbally accosted by a protest group. Man, I don't want to be at that dinner right there. Yeah. I mean, I don't know what they did to deserve that.
Nothing.
Whether it was well, we don't know what happened before the camera started rolling, but let's assume it was nothing.
Yeah, don't ask me. Don't ask me to ask that question. Answer that question.
I would like for that to not be happening. That's not appropriate. That's not getting your message out. That is literally verbally assaulting individuals, and I don't know how you go about enforcing that and what the burden of proof is or the prima facie case for when that happened and the elements for that are, because that could be misapplied and misused. But there are behaviors that I think we need to try and curtail. We've got to do it in a way that is true to our Constitution and our First Amendment rights.
So let's call it, again, calling it for what it is. Do you think, because you mentioned there's a lot of overlap with laws that are already in place. I mean, almost, you went down the list, and I mean, it seems like there's just, these are already laws that are just simply not being enforced. So is this more of a political play here, to kind of, again, kind of come off as, hey, look, Republicans are the law and order party and that sort of thing, or are there some gaps that need to be filled there?
I just think that this is the most blatant political, ridiculous thing I think that I've seen in a while. I think it's incredibly poorly written. I think it's just all bullet points, like you guys said. It looks like the governor, I don't know how much he had to do with this, but someone's watching the news and got riled up and decided to put some stuff on paper. It's completely one-sided. You were talking earlier about people getting verbally assaulted and everything. I think, if this election's turned into in 2020 has become a thing where people just kind of go out and verbally assault each other. If you have, a Trump flag over here, then people are going to get crazy and whatever. If you have a BLM sticker over here, people are going to get crazy and people are just kind of like,
but it's one of those things. It's Christian. It's not that it's not about it being widespread, because it's obviously not. There are simply pockets of this, but we know that they've been protesting, in South Tampa, Swan Circle, kind of notoriously.
Yeah, but let's
Hyde
talk about
Park.
The protests. Like, I've been to several protests. I was one of the people that felt compelled to go out there early on, and I think that it was really funny from the time I still have to deal with my parents and they're around, and I'm an only child, and this has been my whole life where I'm dealing with these guys. So of course, I know, I'm like ready to go out there, and I'm like, damn, should I tell them or not? And the minute that I'm like, what, I'm just going to tell them just because they need to, I'm just going to be straight.
Right, in case something happens.
My mom's like, what are you doing today? And I'm like, packing a bag. The reality of going out there, talking to people, understanding where people are coming from, why they're out there, what they're upset about, and the point they're trying to make. And then the spirit of camaraderie, the spirit of, it's a very, when I've been involved in any conversation that I've had, it's always been very, obviously people are really passionate and riled up and not very happy with things in order to go out there and protest. But the people that have been out there and organizing have been very, very, very clear about there's things to do and things not to do, and there's contingency plans for what happens if someone what if you're out there walking peacefully and the person next to you decides to go do some craziness, And I think that, in the world of activists, it's been pretty clear that anyone who goes way out of their way to do something like, run across the street and burn something, or, go and assault someone over there or something, those are outliers and they're seen to be agitators. And I think that there's a lot of suspicion among activists about who's actually in the crowd. And, everyone is in this hyper sensitive.
Yeah, but let's talk about that for a second.
Sure.
Because yes, and look, I always recognize, that the people that are out there burning buildings, destroying public-private property are not, for the most part, your actual passionate, engaged Black Lives Matter, lowercase Black Lives Matter.
Take the number of people that have been out protesting, and then look at the number of people that have done something wrong, and I'm sure that it's not even.
But there are far too few.
You have that on the same side when it comes to different conversations. These requested rules changes that they're talking about is just in context of combating rioting, looting, and violence. So I'm assuming someone that is doing what they're supposed to do in regards to coming out and actually showing their disagreement of society, or
because we know it's coming.
They're not going to be the ones throwing a brick to the police.
I'll go back to what I'm saying. There's a reality out there in the street, and there's the stuff that people are talking about or watching on TV. And I don't want to get into talking about the media, this, that, whatever. But at the end of the day, what we think is actually happening is all because of what we perceive, who we're surrounded by, who's talking what. And I think that we live in a world now where, it's obvious that we have constant communications. We're always on some type of technological platform. It's engineered in a way to kind of put us into our own little, we're with the people, we're with our own sounding boards, we hear what we want to. Exactly. So what happens is it destroys the real conversation that has to happen. And I'll go to, why do activists feel like they have to be out in the middle of the street and stop traffic? Well, I think that there's a certain point in which if you don't jar the normal course of events during the day or something, it seems like all that just goes away. I mean,
wait, doesn't the verbiage really be if you infringe on someone else's rights?
I mean, if you're a libertarian, I guess.
Not even that. I mean, if I don't have an issue with people protesting and anything else, that's never been an issue for me.
Yeah.
My issue is when it becomes violent, when you have storefronts burning off in front of USF. That's when it becomes an issue. And I think this is to curtail a little bit of that. I agree, it might be pushing the line in some parts, but if you're not infringing on other people's rights and not harassing, then you should be allowed to protest and do and assemble as much as you want to.
Well, look, Christian, I mean, I mean, you're right. The reason they're doing this, the reason they're getting in people's faces who are dining outdoors, the reason that they are getting into traffic is because they're wanting to get attention, right? They're like, here, pay attention to this issue, right? Pay attention, you know, to what you are not, to what maybe you may be willfully ignoring in terms of what's happening in the world, right? But again, as Anibal said, that's an infringement on people's privacy, their safety, and their rights. And so what this is honestly getting ahead of, because we know it's coming, is that if Trump wins re-election, it's going to be 2016 all over again, just like we saw in Portland, Georgia, Seattle. There are going to be riots. And honestly, I think this is to stem some of that off in advance of the November results. You know, and again, it may be overlapping, but there's going to be some gaps filled here, and you can't sit there and, regardless of who is the one doing it, you can't sit there and say that it's not going to happen, and that, you know, again, kind of like to flip what the president said, that most of them are pretty good people. You know, it's just, you know, the reality is that there are extremists, and regardless of what side you may think they're on, that have capitalized on the current sentiment in this country to riot and destroy and try to overturn these local governments.
I mean, going back to Mr. Perotti was saying, I mean, honestly, do we have to have another law to say that it's, you know, illegal to go burn a building down, or that it's, you know, do we need this? It's just clearly one-sided, and it's clearly, I think, worded in a way almost to either agitate the opposition or to rile up the people that see protesters as looters or see protesters as violent. Because, you know, what's the purpose? I mean, I think you guys have said it before. If these laws already exist to protect all of us from that type of behavior, no matter who's the one doing that behavior, then we shouldn't have to worry about it. And it becomes a political statement.
I think the governor's sending a message.
I agree with
wanted
that
to send
completely.
it loud and clear. And there are maybe some gaps that could fill in. And again, there's a lot of work to be done on any of those. And you know, you and I have known each other for, I don't remember how many years now.
Forever.
And we could probably sit down and agree on 90% of the things. You know, maybe we won't agree on whether or not they should be on the road or not, because don't want anybody in the road. That's dangerous for them, dangerous for others. It's what creates the fear, the bad response on one side, the bad response on the other side.
Yeah.
I'd rather give you whatever park you want and or whatever sidewalk, or allow you to move from one part to the next, or get a permit if you want to do straight down a main thoroughfare or something like that, because I just don't want people being endangered. I understand there's a desire to get the message out, but I see our governor on this in this case doing that same messaging. He's looking around at all these different local jurisdictions and the leaders within them and seeing a lot of lack of uniformity on how the officials are enforcing some of the existing things on the books, and they aren't doing this, they are doing this. And so I think he's just trying to put a strong foot forward, and then it'll be a lot of arguing and a lot of grinding away behind the scenes to come out with actionable legislation. And what's left when it's all whittled away will probably be hopefully something more palatable, whatever it is. But it's the nature of things.
Mike,
I agree.
I mean, I think, you know, this is a great transition point, because we're now kind of past the clock. And again, thank you, Mike Perotti, for joining us, Christian Leon and Anibal Cabrera on today's show. Don't forget to subscribe, like, follow, leave us reviews, please, so that we can continue to get the message out there and encourage people to turn out in November. But Mike, I think that's a perfect lead-in, actually, for having you on today, which is, I think the big gap here, in not so much maybe throughout Florida, but maybe you can enlighten me on that, but certainly in other parts of the country where there has been rioting, there has been looting, there has been destruction, there has been, you know, personal, public, private safety at risk here, and the state attorneys, the law enforcement, you know, have either been told to stand down, to not press charges, to basically just let it happen. You know, I mean, this, I think, has been maybe the starkest contrast in why your race is so important, right?
Well, I certainly think that you would be seeing a very different style of leadership if I were the state attorney for Hillsborough County, which is what I've asked for the voters' confidence and support in doing here on November 3rd. It has always been my belief and my background in 20 plus years in every aspect of the criminal justice system that leaders at the most pressing times need to lean for the front. You need to be vocal. You need to be in front of the situation and in a position to have the respect, the rapport, and the capacity to dialogue with both sides in a conflict, and to do it effectively and efficiently, and do it day one. Because, I can tell you, I've spent too many years next to the badges, aware of the badges, defending the badges, firing the badges in some cases. I know mistakes happen. I know that sometimes law enforcement does behave improperly. We do have bad outcomes. So there are things that we need to talk about very seriously and very quickly in our justice system. There are sentencing issues. There are disparate issues with how some of the filing decisions are made. List goes on and on. And so you've got to be able to quickly reach out to that side of the discussion and say, I hear you, I got you, I want to talk to you about this stuff. And at the same time, be getting everybody involved, but let's not go down this path of violence. Let's not injure our community. You don't need to. You've already got my ear. You've already got the support. I don't want any of this chaos. I don't want any of this destruction, because all you're going to do is create more acrimony.
Correct.
And this other side of the equation, that if they heard and understood your message unfiltered and not impeded by the destruction and the mayhem and the fear, they might actually start to get where you're coming from. And I think that's where I'm a bit of a different candidate, because I legitimately from day one understand both sides of the equation and how significant the need is to build a bridge. But I won't tolerate destruction, mayhem, rioting, looting. Nobody wants that anyways. I've talked to so many leaders in the community. They don't want that either. Nobody wants to destroy and burn down our own neighborhood. Those are isolated, individual, insurrectionists, people taking advantage of a situation to chaos for the sake of chaos. Now, leaders have to step forward.
So again, Mike, thank you so much for joining us. And again, you seem incredibly understanding and aware of where the pain points are in again the fact that a lot of our minority communities right now feel that they are their safety is at risk, that maybe they're that they are not given equal opportunities, that the justice system certainly doesn't work in their favor, and so. Kind of bringing it, to the forefront. I mean, we saw these riots, we saw protesting happening here in Tampa. Andrew Warren did not press charges on a lot of these protesters that, in most cases, at least from what I understand, the ones that were arrested anyways, were folks who had been destroying private property. And so at a time where you're trying to be more sensitive about who we're throwing in jail and why we're throwing people in jail, why was that, the wrong move? I mean, why is it that, you've decided, even before this, but why do you think it, that you, or how would you have approached that situation, in other words?
Well, I mean, so there's always been several major events that have taken place since May of this year. We talked earlier about the Fowler Avenue event, which was truly sad for me to see. I was actually out there that night from 9:30 at night until 2:30 in the morning, watching various law enforcement agencies literally follow destruction from one storefront to the next, sitting there taking the fireworks and the objects being thrown at them, taking, tear gas being thrown back at them and stuff like that. Literally, things are being set on fire and stuff like that. I've never seen anything like that. I've never seen law enforcement not respond in a matter like that, where they're just kind of just allowing to have it happen. Andrew Warren wasn't out there that night. The mayor was out there. The chief of police was out there. The sheriff was out there. USF chief was out there. Our state attorney wasn't out there. And again, I'm just of the opinion that at the most critical times in your community, you've got to be there to be part of the decision-making process to one to another. Now, when we go to the event in downtown Tampa, which was a completely different event, right? It's the Curtis Hickson Park issue. And that was the first night of the curfew being in place, you'll remember. And the Tampa Police Department, the protests have been going on. It had not been anything violent like what we saw at Fowler, but the curfew was there, and they weren't dispersing, and weren't dispersing, and weren't dispersing. And I mean, hours went by beyond the curfew time, and you started to sense the agitation. You started to sense the spinning up of things. And some things had been thrown by isolated individuals in the group. And I will tell you, as a law enforcement professional, now you've got the chief out there, you've got the mayor making a decision, and you have that pivotal, okay, I feel I feel this is about to go in a bad direction. I can either try and nip it in the bud now or not. And that's the decision they made that night, to arrest the people that had violated the curfew, that were continuing to protest and do those things after being given ample warnings. And once again, your state attorney, Andrew Warren, wasn't out there. And that's a time when you should be in the ear, because he came back and dropped those charges 3 weeks later.
Yeah, but so give us a little bit of an idea of that, because I mean, obviously, rarely do you get to be at the scene of an actual crime happening, right? But in this case, when we talk about these riots that broke out, that where again, laws were clearly being broken, and there was clearly property destruction. How does that help in terms of having that context of what was actually happening on the ground when these people were arrested?
Well, I think again, you're at the most critical times, at the most difficult situations, you want your elected officials working with some sort of consensus, with some sort of unified idea of what we're going to do to accomplish an appropriate end. And we do that all the time, by the way, in law enforcement. Law enforcement reaches out to the state attorney's office to run a probable cause basis to talk about the grounds for a search warrant or an arrest warrant. Hey, do we have enough? Are you okay with this? Will you all be able to file the charge? This is what we've got so far. So this is not anything unusual I'm proposing. And the social unrest we haven't seen for decades. So now's a good time to get out there and maybe, just maybe, because one of two things is true, right? Either 67 people, I believe it was, 67 people shouldn't have been arrested that night. And maybe if the state attorney had been out there to talk the chief of police and the mayor out of it, they wouldn't have been charged for no reason. Or maybe if you'd been out there seeing and feeling the situation yourself, you would understand why the 67 people were charged, had been given an opportunity, and be part of that decision-making process and what's going on. I think what the public wants is consistency. What they want to know is that there will be an intelligent design behind how we're going to handle these things that create fear in everybody that's involved in it, uncertainty or unknowns in everybody that's involved in it, and that's not an unreasonable request. That is at the very core, I believe, of what being a public servant is about, and ensuring that everybody in the community, regardless of which side of the equation they're on, regardless of the color of their skin, regardless of their affluence, they are getting the same protections, the same respect, the same opportunity, hearing the same message, being given the same instructions. I believe that you walk out to one of these things, and if you've got, the patriots on this side waving the American flag and the Trump flags, and your protesters that are upset with law enforcement, upset with the justice system on this side, there's an opportunity to have dialogues with both of them right there. Mm-hmm. Learn something from this group, learn something from this group, be the one in the middle that refuses to allow them to get at each other. Play bridge builder, play the person, because it's your job. It's your job to understand and hear them, and now go do something with it. And that's what I would be delighted. I've been chomping at the bit to have that opportunity, to have the community leaders from all sides come and join me at a table. And let's talk about the things that I know we can do better inside the court system, just under my control. Be a nice thing.
Yeah, your position, God willing you receive it, November, that we get to know that November 3rd, November 4th, is such a unique position when it comes to the elected officials in Hillsborough County. It is a bridge builder. It is someone that has to kind of look in both sides, because you're not protecting the rights of Republicans or rights of Democrats. You're protecting the rights of all individuals and all citizens, and I'll say it, all individuals that live in Hillsborough County.
Whether victim or accused.
Correct.
Whether victim or accused, I owe both of them the greatest amount of justice that can be delivered from my office, which, by the way, is very powerful, a constitutional, almost unbridled power that comes out of the office to decide in the direction of a community. And the person wielding that power needs to understand the perils of too much one way, too much the other way. Either one is ruinous for a community.
Yeah. In Hillsborough County, and we all know this, how urban and how rural this county really is from one side to the other.
Absolutely.
And the spectrum of individuals living here, beliefs, identities is something that needs to be put upon. And I think you'll do a great job. And I really hope the voters, my wife, my household will be voting for you in November, but I hope the rest of the county realizes how much of an individual you are to put them ahead and make sure all are represented.
I appreciate it. I mean, you 8 years I spent running the jails in Hillsborough County. You don't have that experience and spend the time with those individuals whose liberty has been deprived without walking away with a tremendous appreciation for what aspects of our system are working okay and which ones are failing. I mean, there is clearly so much room for improvement to get individuals who simply don't have, $10 to their name out of the jail. They don't need to be there. We could do more with ROR, and we don't need legislation. We just need leadership.
Correct.
You need an assistant attorney that's willing to stand there at first appearance court and say, "Judge, recommend ROR. No violent history, not a significant crime here, ROR." And that's leadership. And every once in a while, one of those that maybe you let out that way is going to go and do something that you're not happy with within a couple of days, and you got to own it. But the greater thing that you're saving is that you can do that. Look, we've proven the last 6 months now, since March, we've been able to maintain a 400 inmate deficit in our jails right now, simply by letting out non-violent, non-flight risk offenders. So we've been at 3,000, give or take, for 10 years, 3,000 inmates. We haven't gotten above 2,600 since March of this year, just under that premise. Now understand, as a taxpayer, and this is the kind of business decisions I care about, that's $130 a day, times 400 inmates, times 365 days a year, times, if I'd been in this office in January 2017, times 4 years. Ladies and gentlemen, that's $75 million of taxpayer money. It can go to mental health, it can go to crisis intervention, it can go to drug treatment, it can go to giving more resources for our juveniles that are at risk, that don't have mentors, that don't have anybody to help them make less than foolish decisions. And that's a whole nother story that we don't have time for on tonight's show, I can tell you. But we've got to have leadership that doesn't just say, "I'm not prosecuting you, I'm dropping it, I'm letting diversion here, I'm letting diversion there," but has meaningful interactions with the community to say, "Yeah, I'm dropping it, but we're going to make sure that we've got something in place for you, because we're not going to have you come back to this door 4 days from now." There's got to be something more substantive with the community.
Well, Mike, again, thank you so much for joining us. And again, for those of you who may be interested in learning more about Mike's campaign, what do they need to do?
Well, you can find me at www, and this is very fancy, so hang on, MikePerotti.com, and it's MikePerotti, MikePerotti.com. You can find me on Facebook at Mike Perotti FL. There's emails to reach me out on the website. There's a phone number you can reach me at, and I answer my phone like it's my obligation, because I've got some semblance of OCD and ADD and a bunch of other stuff. So, this decision I did not take lightly. It's my pleasure to be stepping and taking, I've prosecuted, I've defended, I've been on every side of the equation, running the jails. I really think that somebody who understands and appreciates both the challenges that police face, as well as the sincere concerns that our public faces, we need somebody like that in this office to ensure that justice is being done and to keep people safe and to ensure that victims are being protected. And I really do believe I am the person to do that job. It is about principles. It's not about politics. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican and independent, which side of the equation you swing from. I work for you. And I think it's time that we have that. And if given the opportunity, I'm 100% confident that we can very quickly put all of this to rest and really forge a new way forward in this county and build that bridge, bring everybody together, and get some good justice for everybody.
Yeah, because I think with a lot of people, and I think this table can agree on, is that at the end of the day, I have no control on what happens in Portland. I have no control what happens in Seattle. I have no control what happens in Austin. I have somewhat of a control and a voice of what happens on my street, in my city, in my community. And I would want to make sure that the voices that are having dissension or have concerns when it comes to police interaction with individuals, that needs to be highlighted and that needs to be communicated and that needs to be discussed. I don't care what's happening in DC. I want to know what's happening off of Jefferson in downtown Tampa. I want to know what's happening in the courthouse. I want to know what's happening there. And I have a really concern that on the left and the right, they have no idea.
They don't.
What's going on.
If you live in Fishhawk, you don't know what life is like on 40th and Chelsea.
Yes.
If you live in New Tampa, you don't get what it's like in Sulphur Springs.
Correct.
And you know, and that's where you get this disconnect, and it takes somebody who actually truly intimately understands both sides. Do you all know that currently in the city of Tampa, gun violence is up 49% this year alone?
Wow.
Did you hear that on the news anywhere?
No.
Did y'all see it on Bay News Night? No, you did. Gun violence in the city of Tampa, 49% this year during the lockdown of COVID. You don't go more than a couple of days without there being another shooting incident somewhere in the city of Tampa right now. And that should concern everybody, because what I know then is that I've got some good members of that community that in one moment don't have a lot of trust and rapport with the men and women wearing the badge, tragically. They don't feel like they're being served. They don't feel like they can trust them. And they're living in fear of the bad actor that's 1 block away from their house, and they can't say anything about it. And I'm not okay with that. And I need the folks in Fishhawk to know that we're not okay with that. And when we start to fix those things, then everybody else doesn't have to worry about their car getting blocked in at Swan Avenue. And doesn't have to worry about stores being burned or looted or rioted, because everybody is being served by bold leadership.
Yeah, and Chris, this goes into your point. I think everyone gets so hyperbolic of the big national issues that are happening when they can't even tell me who the police department head is in Tampa. If you can't name me the person that is in charge of TPD, then you shouldn't be having a conversation about police brutality. I'm sorry, you cannot, because you're not investing enough in the community that you live in. Now, if you can tell me those names, or if you've done a ride along, that opens so many people's eyes and ears to understand, okay, now I understand the perspective of the police officer, and I should be sitting with the community to understand the position of where the community is coming from. But we are not having these conversations because we are so embroiled in what's happening in Houston, in Missouri. And I could care less what's happening.
I wish them the best, though.
Oh,
good luck for y'all.
Good luck for you guys. You guys have your own system.
Tampa,
Good luck.
County.
But this is Hillsborough County. We vote for who we vote for here. I can control what's happening here. Right. We can all control what's happening here. I don't want us to focus on what's happening around the country. I want us to focus on what's happening in our own communities. And until we get to that point, it's never going to go off, because I can't control what happens in other parts of the world.
All right, guys. Oh, we're quite over the clock, and Christian over there looks incredibly tired. No, I'm just kidding. Go ahead, Christian.
I'll write it.
No, you've been sitting there so quiet, and it's like, no. Actually, I was gonna throw it to you because I do want you to close out the show talking a little bit about how people can find out more about the work you're doing, because I do think it's important work. I really appreciate you coming on the show, and I hope you come back and continue to give us a different perspective here on the show. But again, tell us a little bit more about CEL and how people can learn more about what you're doing over there.
Yeah, well, just getting back to the topic at hand, I think
please.
It's very heartwarming, and it's very nice to know that everyone around the table can agree that it takes really understanding both sides and understanding what is actually going on. I think that, what you're talking about of going to Sulphur Springs and going to the communities and start talking to people, I think that, a lot of, unfortunately, people make decisions based on what they see. And if what they're presented is something that is, horrible and shameful, and, then of course they're going to all of a sudden ride their biases to the point where they're going to judge everyone in one fell swoop. Like, oh my gosh, if you support Black lives, that means you're about to go burn down a Starbucks, and vice versa. If you're like, oh my gosh, you're a Republican, well, that means, you hate everybody, and you can't wait for militia to run around with machine guns. It's such a distorted perception of reality. And I feel very strongly that we draw lines right now between left and right. Like, that's how we're looking at the world. What we should be looking at is dividing between good and bad.
Amen.
And I think that we can all, I'm sure there's a lot of some outliers out there, whatever, but we can really all agree on what is good and bad. I think that we have to all kind of come to that spirit and to draw those lines. And we have to be very willing to stop defending people that are doing wrong because they are on this side of this crazy line that we've drawn. And I think that type of ethic of, trying to hide the sins of the people that we're identified with and highlight the sins of the people that are against the people that, we've identified with. I think that if we can get over that and we can start really discussing about what's right, what's wrong, what is real justice, what's of real benefit to all of us together. I think that, if people could really understand that there's a certain level of care and attention and investment that has to happen for people that are suffering really, really, really difficult circumstances, or else those challenges are going to manifest into greater problems for society as a whole. I think that, if you look just at education, if we don't take time to really look at our education system and realize and make a commitment, all of us, that any child that's born that's going to go into a public school should have the same amount of resources and care and attention, and for the system to be a real meritocracy, how we all think it should be. Like, if we can't focus on that, then I think that we have a real issue, because all of a sudden you have an education disparity, and that manifests into some horrible conditions later on in life, So I think that the work that I'm doing now is really an effort. I think that there's a lot of nonprofits that are very, they're focused on immediate needs of the community. And they play, you just look at the work that Feeding Tampa Bay has done. You look at the work that a lot of nonprofits have done. They've done incredible work, because there's a lot of need, especially after this year. There's a lot of need right now. What we would like to do is to kind of take a think tank approach and take an entrepreneurial approach, and to try to think, okay, let's say affordable housing. All right, well, with everything that we know in the year 2020, with all of the experts that we have at USF, with all of very enlightened, knowledgeable minds, and with capital in order to try to make things that make economic sense too, we can try to start iterating solutions in things that have worked in other countries, other places in this country, or something that just makes sense that we might want to try. We want to kind of do that, and we want to start chipping away at the root cause of a lot of these problems that we've dealt with for generations. One of the interesting conversations I've had with my parents lately is when they immigrated to this country in the late 60s, they got to Jersey right after there were a ton of riots back then. And they were like, wow, we can't believe that, here we are now.
Oh, welcome to America. It's great.
All over again. It's like the exact same thing is happening. So I think that, my kind of thrust for my work is I want to try to accomplish so much so that my organization can be just unnecessary as soon as possible. And I think that, the way that I see it is we're a geographically situated nonprofit. So to me, if we can look at a mile by a mile or 2 miles by 2 miles and just focus on this right here and say, it's absurd that in this city where, you walk down the street and you can go here, 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 or you can go drive 10 minutes and be in these beautiful areas, that we will allow, our citizens and our neighbors to be in such conditions that, when you look at metrics, they're compared to countries that a lot of people won't even find on a map, and you say oh my gosh, at the corner of this and this, if you look at this population right here, the, child mortality rate is like this, or the levels of this disease, the incidence of this disease are off the charts. What's going on? And we have everything possible in order to change that. So that's kind of a challenge. Why? Let's just focus right here and see how we can do better in this community, and then open source all of those solutions to anyone. If we find something that works, why it should work, be happy to kind of give that formula to anyone and to help them through it. So
go ahead and give us a website or phone number.
Sure, it's easy. It's thecell.org. The cell was 1 L, and you can just go there right now. It is not complete with everything that I'd like it to be. You'll definitely see an evolution in it. But, one of the things, for example, we want to do is we want to take photojournalists and be able to document that area annually so that we can see the progress in different areas. I think that, we're looking to be kind of that type of institution in the area that really brings people together, brings resources together, connects dots that weren't there. Like we've talked before, the same disconnect between different sides of the aisle exists between incredible institutions in that area and the citizens that are blocks away.
They drive right past it and don't realize
completely
what's happening 2 blocks over.
Yeah. And just because there's a lack of communication between both sides or people don't know how to reach each other, there's a ton of resources that are available to the community that the community is not taking advantage of. So it's not necessarily that, institutions aren't doing something to benefit the community. It's that literally they don't know how to get those resources to the community, or the community for whatever reason feels intimidated a little bit by approaching these institutions or taking advantage of the resources at hand. So there's a lot of work to be done just at that level, but then also, finding solutions that don't exist.
All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. We've got a Stanley Cup game to get to.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show. This is The Yard Sign. Again, every Monday night, 7 o'clock. If you want to catch the audio version of our podcast, you can go to Apple, Spotify, or Google platforms. Tonight's show will also be up on YouTube later tonight, so keep an eye out for that. Thank you so much for watching. And again, please like, share, comment, and help us grow the show. Thank you again to Mike Perotti, Christian Leon, Anibal, David Cabrera, as always. I'm Jonny Torres, your host for The Yard Sign. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. So long, everybody. Good night.